The Amtrak station in Lakewood, Minnesota had always been unremarkable. A modest brick building with worn wooden benches inside, ticketing windows that had seen decades of travelers, and tracks that stretched into the distance like parallel promises of elsewhere. On December 12, 1996, the station was decorated for Christmas, a small artificial tree in the corner, tinsel hanging from the bulletin board, and a wreath on the front door. Outside, snow fell in thick, silent flakes, accumulating on the platform and muffling the sounds of the small town. It was in this picturesque, postcard-worthy scene that 6 cousins disappeared without a trace. The temperature that evening hovered just below freezing. The station's old heating system struggled against the Minnesota winter, creating a bubble of warmth that travelers stepped into gratefully from the biting cold outside. Security cameras, grainy, black and white, and positioned only at the main entrance and ticket counter, captured the 6 young people entering the station at 7:43 p.m. They were laughing, shoving each other playfully, their breath visible in clouds before they stepped through the doors. They would never be seen again. Vanessa Thornhill, 19. Aidan Novak, 18. Twins Eliza and Emma Patterson, 17. James Crawford, 20. Daniel Bennett, 19. 6 cousins from the extended Thornhill Novak family, traveling to Chicago to visit their grandmother for the holidays. 6 young people with their futures stretching before them like the train tracks outside. 6 souls who vanished between the station's entrance and the arrival of the 8:15 p.m. train to Chicago. The whole town helped search, recalls former Lakewood Sheriff Thomas Reynolds, now 78, his voice cracking slightly when interviewed decades later. We had volunteers combing every inch of those woods, every building in town. National Guard came in. FBI. Everyone. It was like they just evaporated. The investigation would become one of the most baffling disappearances in American history. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle, no evidence of abduction, no witnesses who saw anything suspicious. 6 people simply ceased to exist within the confines of a small town train station, while at least 15 other travelers waited nearby. And now, 27 years later, something has been found. November 5, 2023. A hiking path 3 miles from the train station. A severe storm had uprooted a massive oak tree, exposing what lay beneath its roots for nearly 3 decades, a duffel bag. Blue canvas, muddied and degraded by years underground, but still recognizable as the bag Vanessa Thornhill had been carrying in the security footage. Inside, 6 train tickets to Chicago, 6 wallets, munlets, 6 sets of house keys, and a Polaroid photograph that has authorities reopening a case many had reluctantly filed away as unsolvable. What happened to the Thornhill Novak cousins? How did Vanessa's bag end up buried under a tree miles from the station? And what does the newly discovered Polaroid reveal about their fate? This is their story. The Thornhill and Novak families had deep roots in Lakewood. 3 generations had lived, worked, married, and raised children in the town of just under 5,000 people. The family owned the local hardware store, taught at the high school, worked at the regional hospital, and had a reputation for being tight-knit despite their growing numbers. Those kids grew up more like siblings than cousins, explained Harriet Thornhill, mother of Vanessa, in a 1997 interview. Her eyes were hollow with grief, hands constantly fidgeting with her wedding ring. They did everything together. Summer camping trips, school activities, holidays. They were inseparable. The Christmas trip to Chicago was an annual tradition. Their grandmother, Eleanor Thornhill, had moved to the city after her husband died, unable to bear the memories haunting their family home. Each December, various combinations of grandchildren would take the train to visit her. That year, it was the older cousins' turn, all of them either in college or about to graduate high school. They were so excited, Daniel Bennett's father Richard said, his voice barely audible in police interviews. Danny had just been accepted to University of Minnesota. He wanted to tell his grandmother in person. The day of their disappearance was thoroughly ordinary. Security cameras from various locations around Lakewood captured fragments of their movements throughout the day. The Patterson twins went shopping at the local mall in the morning, purchasing Christmas presents. Vanessa and Aidan had lunch at Garfield's Diner on Main Street. James and Daniel spent the afternoon at the town library, studying for final exams. At 6:30 p.m., all six gathered at the Thornhill home for an early dinner before their trip. Neighbors reported seeing them leave the house together at approximately 7:15 p.m., carrying duffel bags and backpacks. And the walk to the train station would have taken about 20 minutes. The station's exterior camera recorded them arriving at 7:43 p.m. They entered the building 17 minutes later than expected, though investigators never determined the reason for this delay. Nothing in the footage suggested they were being followed or under duress. Inside the station, the security coverage was limited. One camera pointed at the ticket counter captured Vanessa purchasing hot chocolates for the group at 7:47 p.m. Another showed James checking the arrivals board at 7:51 p.m. After that, there was no further footage of any of the cousins. What is known is that at 8:15 p.m., when the Chicago-bound train arrived, they did not board. Their reserved seats remained empty. That the station attendant, Harold Weber, remembered announcing the train's arrival over the intercom and seeing a group of young people in the waiting area beforehand, though he couldn't definitively identify them as the missing cousins. By 9:30 p.m., when the cousins hadn't called to confirm their arrival at the transfer station in Minneapolis as promised, the families began to worry. By midnight, a formal missing persons report had been filed. By morning, the FBI had been called in. It was unprecedented, said former FBI Special Agent Catherine Walsh, who led the initial investigation. In my 23 years with the Bureau, I'd never seen a case where multiple people vanished simultaneously without any evidence whatsoever. It defied explanation. The investigation quickly ruled out the most obvious possibilities. None of the cousins had credit card activity after their disappearance. Their bank accounts remained untouched. Their passports were found in their respective homes. There were no signs of planning or preparation for running away. These were happy, well-adjusted kids, Walsh emphasized. Good students, close to their families, and they had plans for the future. There was absolutely no reason for them to disappear voluntarily. The second possibility that they had been abducted seemed equally implausible, given the circumstances. The train station was small but busy that evening, with 15 other passengers waiting for various trains. None reported seeing anything suspicious. No one heard screams or signs of struggle. The station had limited exits, all of which were visible to others in the waiting area. That's to abduct 6 physically fit young adults, some of whom were athletes, without anyone noticing, without any of them having a chance to call for help or leave a sign. Walsh shook her head. It would have required a level of coordination and resources that seemed beyond the capabilities of any local criminal element. Nevertheless, investigators thoroughly examined every registered sex offender, person with a violent criminal history, and transient individual within a 50-mile radius. None produced viable leads. The third theory, that the cousins had met with foul play outdoors after leaving the station, was complicated by the weather conditions that night. A significant snowfall had begun around 7 p.m., which would have preserved footprints leading away from the station. The police photographs from the following morning showed pristine snow on all paths except the main entrance. There were no tracks indicating the cousins had left the building. It was as if they had simply ceased to exist inside that station, Walsh said. No evidence they left. No evidence they remained. Nothing. Nothing. As days turned into weeks, the search expanded. Lakewood Pond was dragged. Abandoned buildings were searched. Cadaver dogs combed the surrounding forests. Ground-penetrating radar was used to look for recently disturbed Earth. Psychics offered their services. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries. Nothing. Nothing. For the families, the absence of answers was its own special torment. Not knowing is worse than any truth could be. Eliza and Emma's mother, Catherine Patterson, told reporters on the 1-year anniversary of the disappearance. If they are dead, we need to know. If they are alive somewhere, we need to know. This limbo is unbearable. The investigation gradually lost momentum as leads dried up and resources were reallocated to newer cases. By 2000, active investigation had essentially ceased, though the case remained technically open. Life in Lakewood changed. The train station, once a simple transportation hub, became a place of whispers and avoidance. The local teenagers dared each other to spend the night there on December 12th. And the Thornhill Novak families suffered under the weight of their loss. Two sets of parents divorced. One father died by suicide in 2004. Grandmother Eleanor passed away in 2007, still waiting for answers that never came. The town itself seemed haunted by the mystery. Tourism declined. Families moved away. The once thriving Main Street saw businesses close. Lakewood became known for only one thing, the place where 6 people vanished into thin air. And then, 27 years later, the storm came. November 2nd, 2023, brought one of the most severe storms Minnesota had seen in decades. Hurricane-force winds tore through the state, downing power lines, ripping off roofs and uprooting trees. In Lakewood, the damage was extensive, with nearly a third of the town's ancient oak trees toppled by the gale. 3 days later, as cleanup efforts continued, the local resident Philip Morales was walking his dog along a hiking trail when he noticed something unusual protruding from the massive root ball of a fallen oak. At first he thought it was simply a piece of garbage, perhaps an old tarp or plastic bag exposed by the upended earth. On closer inspection he realized it was a duffel bag. "It was just instinct, you know," Morales later told local news. "I grew up here. Everyone in Lakewood knows about the cousins. When I saw that bag buried under a tree this close to the train station, I just knew." Morales immediately called the police, who secured the area as a potential crime scene. The bag was carefully excavated and found to contain the personal effects of all 6 missing cousins' wallets, train tickets, house keys, buttons, and a small makeup bag belonging to Vanessa. DNA testing confirmed traces of her skin cells on the bag's handle. Finding the bag was significant, explained current Lakewood Police Chief Andrea Zimmerman. It established for the first time that the cousins had indeed left the train station somehow, contradicting our long-standing theory that whatever happened to them occurred inside the building. But it was what lay at the bottom of the bag that truly stunned investigators, a Polaroid photograph that had been carefully sealed in a plastic sandwich bag, preserving it from decades of moisture and decomposition. The photograph showed all 6 cousins standing in front of what appeared to be a small cabin or hunting shack. They were smiling, but their body language suggested tension, arms crossed, standing slightly apart from each other. Behind them, partially visible through the cabin's window, was what appeared to be another person, though their face was obscured by the reflection of the flash. Most disturbing was what had been written on the white border of the Polaroid in black marker: "We should never have gotten off the platform." "This changes everything," Chief Zimmerman acknowledged. "It tells us they were alive after leaving the station. It tells us they reached some sort of cabin. And it strongly suggests they felt threatened or in danger." The FBI has since been called back in, with a new task force dedicated to the case. Analysts are currently working to identify the cabin in the photograph and determine its location. The writing is consistent with Vanessa Thornhill's handwriting, confirmed FBI handwriting analyst Dr. Leslie Harper. And, based on the development of the Polaroid and other forensic indicators, we believe the photo was taken within 24 to 48 hours of their disappearance. For the surviving family members, the discovery has reopened wounds while simultaneously offering the first real hope for answers in nearly 3 decades. "I have imagined 1,000 different scenarios over the years," said Jonathan Novak, Aiden's younger brother, now 42. "But seeing that photo, seeing them alive after they disappeared from the station, it's given me something I'd lost long ago. Hope." Aiden. The question now becomes, what happened after the photo was taken? Why did Vanessa hide the bag under a tree? And most importantly, where are the 6 cousins now? The investigation is focusing on several new angles. First, identifying the cabin in the photograph. Initial analysis suggests it may be one of hundreds of hunting cabins scattered throughout the forests surrounding Lakewood. Many of these structures are unregistered, used seasonally, and located off established roads and trails. Second, determining how the cousins left the station without being seen. The discovery of the bag 3 miles away confirms they must have exited the building somehow, and despite the lack of footprints in the snow and the absence of sightings by other passengers. We are re-examining the station blueprints, explained FBI Special Agent Russell Hargrove, who is leading the renewed investigation, looking at maintenance tunnels, storage areas, any space that might have allowed them to leave unseen. We are also re-interviewing surviving witnesses from that night with this new information in mind. Third, and perhaps most troubling, is identifying the figure partially visible in the cabin window. Enhanced imaging has been unable to clarify the person's features, but analysts have determined it was likely a man based on height and build comparison to known objects in the frame. The fact that this person was standing inside while the cousins were outside, possibly watching them through the window, suggests an adversarial relationship, Hargrove noted. Combined with the message written on the photo, we have to consider the possibility that the cousins were under duress. As news of the discovery spread, tips began flooding into the FBI hotline. Former residents shared stories of strange encounters in the woods around Lakewood. Hikers reported finding unusual stone formations deep in the forest. Local folklore about the area resurfaced tales of people going missing over the decades, of sounds coming from the woods at night, and of hunters finding abandoned cabins that seemed to disappear when they tried to return to them. Most of these leads proved to be dead ends or products of imagination fueled by true crime podcasts and paranormal television shows. But 3 tips stood out to investigators as potentially credible. The first came from a former forest ranger who had worked in the area from 1990 to 2002. He reported finding an abandoned cabin matching the description of the one in the Polaroid during a routine patrol in early 1997, approximately 5 miles from where the duffel bag was discovered. When he returned with colleagues to investigate further, they were unable to locate the structure again. Initially, we dismissed this as confusion about landmarks or location, Hargrove said. But given what we know now, we are taking another look. The second tip came from a truck driver who had been passing through Lakewood on the night of December 12, 1996. He reported picking up a young man matching James Crawford's description walking along Highway 23, approximately 10 miles from the train station, then around 11:30 p.m. that night. The young man had appeared disoriented and refused a ride, saying only that he needed to get back to them. The truck driver hadn't connected this encounter to the disappearance until seeing recent news coverage about the found bag. The third and perhaps most significant lead came from Eleanor Thornhill's former caretaker, who had been going through the deceased woman's belongings in storage. She discovered a letter postmarked December 22, 1996, 10 days after the disappearance with no return address. Inside was a blank sheet of paper containing only a crude map drawn in what appears to be charcoal, showing a series of X marks in a pattern around Lakewood. Eleanor had apparently never shown this letter to investigators. We are currently analyzing the map and comparing it to geographical features around Lakewood, Hargrove explained. Preliminary assessment suggests the X marks could represent cabins or other structures in the forest. As the renewed investigation gains momentum, a picture is slowly emerging, one that contradicts many of the assumptions held about the case for decades. We now believe the cousins left the station voluntarily, likely through a service exit not covered by security cameras, Hargrove stated. Something or someone prompted them to deviate from their plans to board the Chicago train. They made their way to a cabin in the woods, where they encountered an unknown individual. At some point, Vanessa Thornhill hid their bag containing the Polaroid, possibly as evidence or a message for anyone searching for them. What remains unknown is why they left, what happened at the cabin, and most crucially, where they are now. For the people of Lakewood, the discovery has rekindled a community's determination to solve its most haunting mystery. The volunteer search parties have begun combing the woods again, using the location of the found bag as a starting point. Local historians are reviewing town records for information about hunting cabins and unregistered structures in the area. Students at Lakewood High School have started a social media campaign to spread awareness of the case nationwide. This town has lived under the shadow of this disappearance for almost 30 years, said Mayor Elizabeth Wilson. Finding answers isn't just about closure for the families, it's about healing for Lakewood itself. As federal and local investigators continue their work, one question looms largest: could any of the Thornhill Novak cousins still be alive? It's not outside the realm of possibility, Hargrove admitted cautiously. While the statistical likelihood decreases with time in missing persons cases, we have documented instances of individuals being found alive decades after their disappearances. Until we have definitive evidence otherwise, we proceed under the assumption that finding them alive remains a possibility. For the families who have lived with uncertainty for 27 years, this sliver of hope is both comforting and agonizing. Every time the phone rings, there's that moment Jonathan Novak confessed. That split second where you think this is it. This is the call telling me they have found them. After all these years, that never goes away. As winter approaches Lakewood once again, the FBI has established a permanent presence in the town. The hunt for the cabin in the Polaroid continues. Ground-penetrating radar surveys are being conducted around the location where the bag was found. And investigators are preparing to employ new technologies and methodologies that didn't exist when the cousins first vanished. 27 years is a long time, Agent Hargrove acknowledged. But in cold cases, time can sometimes work in our favor, and people who were afraid to speak then may come forward now. Loyalties change. Consciences weigh heavier with age, and physical evidence, like this bag and photograph, can emerge in unexpected ways. As the first snowfall of 2023 blankets Lakewood in white, just as it did on that December night in 1996, the search for Vanessa, Aiden, Eliza, Emma, Lana, James and Daniel continues with renewed urgency. The train station still stands, a silent witness to whatever set these events in motion. The forest holds its secrets, and somewhere, perhaps 6 cousins who stepped into the snow 27 years ago wait to be found. The question that haunts investigators and family members alike is written on the Polaroid in Vanessa's determined handwriting. We should never have gotten off the platform. What did she mean? What did they see? And why, after nearly 3 decades of silence, has this message finally surfaced? The investigation continues. Winter descended on Lakewood with familiar ferocity. Snow piled in drifts against the sides of buildings. Trees stood stark and skeletal against white skies. FBI agents, many from warmer states, struggled with the brutal Minnesota cold as they established a command center in the town's community hall. The conditions are challenging, admitted Special Agent Russell Hargrove during a press briefing in December 2023. But they are also informative. Working in this environment helps us understand the physical challenges the cousins would have faced if they were outdoors that night in 1996. The investigation had expanded significantly since the discovery of the duffel bag. 30 agents were now assigned to the case, along with forensic specialists, behavioral analysts, and technological experts. The Polaroid photograph had been sent to Quantico for advanced analysis, while teams of local volunteers continued searching the expansive forests surrounding Lakewood. By Christmas, the 27th anniversary of the disappearance, several significant developments had emerged. First, analysis of the Polaroid confirmed it had been taken with a camera belonging to Emma Patterson. The camera itself was not among the items found in the duffel bag, but suggesting it remained in the possession of the cousins or whoever they encountered after Vanessa hid their belongings. Second, soil samples from the duffel bag contained microscopic particles of an unusual mineral formation not commonly found in Minnesota. Geologists identified it as a type of crystalline structure typically associated with cave systems rather than surface deposits. Third, and perhaps most significant, enhanced imaging of the Polaroid revealed additional details in the background of the photo. Behind the cabin was what appeared to be a rock face or cliff. And on this surface, barely visible, were markings that several anthropologists identified as potentially being petroglyphs, ancient rock carvings created by indigenous peoples. This is potentially a major breakthrough, explained Dr. Amara Okafor, an anthropologist specializing in pre-Columbian North American cultures. These particular patterns are consistent with Algonquian pictographs dating back 500 to 1,000 years. If we can identify the specific site where these carvings are located, we could pinpoint the cabin's location. Working with historians from the Minnesota Historical Society and representatives from the Ojibwe Nation, but investigators began compiling a database of known petroglyph sites in the region. None perfectly matched what was visible in the photograph, suggesting either an undocumented site or one that had been destroyed in the intervening years. Meanwhile, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was constructing a psychological profile of the six cousins, trying to understand what might have motivated them to leave the station voluntarily. These were not impulsive individuals, noted FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Tyler Morrison. Their academic records, interviews with friends, and family accounts all indicate they were thoughtful, responsible young adults. All six to unanimously decide to abandon their travel plans. They must have encountered something extremely compelling. The working theory began to shift from abduction to a scenario where the cousins chose to follow someone or something away from the station. But what could have been persuasive enough to convince six people to walk away from their plans, their bags, and ultimately their lives? The answer began to emerge from an unexpected source: the Lakewood Historical Society archives. Volunteer researcher Marianne Lundberg, a retired librarian, discovered a series of newspaper articles from 1972 describing another disappearance from the same train station. 3 college students had vanished while waiting for a train to Minneapolis. They were never found, but their backpacks were discovered 6 months later, buried under a cairn of rocks approximately 4 miles from where the Thornhill Novak duffel bag had been unearthed. The parallels are undeniable, Hargrove acknowledged when presented with the information. The same location. Multiple young victims, personal belongings found buried some distance away. The main difference is that the 1972 case never received the national attention that the cousins' disappearance did. Further research revealed additional cases: a family of 4 in 1954, 2 hikers in 1967, a geological survey team in 1983. All had disappeared within a 10-mile radius of Lakewood. All cases remained unsolved. None had been connected previously because they spanned different jurisdictions, occurred years apart, and predated modern database systems that might have identified the pattern. We are looking at the possibility of a serial predator active in this area for decades, Hargrove stated. Someone with intimate knowledge of the terrain, significant patience, and the ability to operate without detection. This theory gained strength when investigators re-interviewed Harold Weber, the station attendant who had been working the night the cousins disappeared. Now in his 80s and living in a nursing home, Weber's recollection of that evening had evolved over the years. There was someone else there, he told agents, his rheumy eyes fixed on some distant point. A man I didn't recognize. He was talking to the young people, showing them something. I thought he worked for the Forestry Service because of his jacket. When shown photographs of various uniform jackets, Weber identified one belonging to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, specifically their Forest Management Division. Records from the department confirmed no official personnel had been scheduled to be in Lakewood that evening. However, the former DNR employee Francis Hartley had been dismissed from service in early 1996 after concerning behavior including unauthorized use of equipment and unexplained absences during work hours. Hartley's last known address was approximately 15 miles from Lakewood. We are very interested in speaking with Mr. Hartley, Hargrove said carefully during a press conference, avoiding labeling him a suspect. We believe he may have information relevant to our investigation. Finding Francis Hartley proved challenging. He had apparently dropped out of conventional society shortly after leaving the DNR. No credit card usage, tax filings, or official records existed after 1997. His social security number had not been used. No death certificate had been filed. He had simply vanished, much like the people investigators now suspected him of targeting. As January 2024 arrived, another lead emerged from the analysis of Eleanor Thornhill's charcoal map. When overlaid with topographical maps of the region, the X marks corresponded not with buildings or roads, but with cave entrances, most of them small, unmarked on official maps, and known primarily to local spelunkers and indigenous communities. The cave system under Lakewood County is more extensive than many people realize, explained geologist Dr. Howard Freeman. There are hundreds of entrances, many no larger than a foxhole. But they connect to tunnels that extend for miles in some cases. It's entirely possible to enter one opening and emerge miles away with no one seeing you above ground. This revelation sparked a new direction in the search. If the cousins had somehow ended up in the cave system, they could have traveled significant distances unseen. The absence of footprints in the snow, the lack of witnesses seeing them leave the station, all could be explained if they had access to underground passages. The FBI brought in cave rescue specialists and expert spelunkers to begin methodically exploring the system. Ground-penetrating radar identified several caverns large enough to potentially contain structures, underground spaces, where someone could create a living area undetected by the outside world. We are proceeding cautiously, Hargrove emphasized. These caves can be dangerous, unstable in places, prone to flooding, difficult to navigate. We have to consider the possibility that the cousins entered this system, became disoriented or trapped, and were unable to find their way out. But the discovery of the Polaroid complicated this theory. The photo clearly showed them outside a cabin, apparently after their disappearance from the station. Had they emerged from the caves somewhere else? Had they been held at the cabin before being taken into the cave system? Or was there another explanation entirely? The breakthrough came in February 2024. A team of FBI agents and local volunteers had been systematically searching areas near the identified cave entrances when they discovered something unusual: a small cabin tucked into the side of a rocky outcropping. Lake Gurum was Cheesten, partially obscured by evergreens and almost invisible, unless approached from exactly the right angle. The structure matched the one visible in the Polaroid. It was surreal, recounted FBI agent Justine Kimball, who was part of the discovery team. We'd been looking at that photograph for months, and suddenly we were standing in the exact spot where it was taken. The cabin was weathered, clearly abandoned for years, but unmistakable. The cabin's location was approximately 7 miles from the train station as the crow flies, but nearly 15 miles by established trails. More significantly, a cave entrance was found less than 50 yards from the structure, a narrow opening that descended steeply before connecting to the larger system below. This confirms our working theory, Hargrove announced. The cousins somehow left the station, traveled to or were taken to this cabin, and then potentially entered the cave system nearby. The question remains, did they go willingly or under duress? The cabin itself had been abandoned long enough that animal intrusion, weather damage, and natural decay had destroyed most potential evidence. However, several findings proved significant. First, carved into one of the interior walls was a sequence of 6 sets of initials, VT and EPE, EP, EPJC, DB, matching the first and last initials of each of the missing cousins. Second, a trapdoor in the floor revealed a storage space containing preserved food, batteries, kerosene, and other survival supplies dating back to the mid-1990s, suggesting the cabin had been specifically stocked and maintained. Third, and most disturbing, investigators found a journal written in what handwriting experts confirmed was Francis Hartley's script. The contents painted a picture of a deeply disturbed individual who believed he was protecting young people from what waits below. They come to the trains but never leave, one entry read. I try to warn them. Some listen. Most don't. The Thornhill children might understand. They can see it too. I can tell. The journal described Hartley's growing obsession with the cave system beneath Lakewood and his belief that something ancient and malevolent dwelled within it. He wrote about markings on the walls that spoke to him, and about his self-appointed mission to prevent people from being taken. Hartley appears to have been suffering from a severe delusional disorder, explained forensic psychiatrist Dr. Elaine Fuentes, who reviewed the journal. He had constructed an elaborate belief system centered around protecting others from a perceived threat. In his mind, he was a guardian, not a predator. But had Hartley's delusions led him to harm the very people he claimed to be protecting? The final pages of the journal, dated December 14th, 1996, 2 days after the cousins' disappearance, suggested a different scenario. They wouldn't listen. Showed them the old pictures, told them about the others. They laughed. Then they saw the markings themselves and stopped laughing. The twins said their grandmother had told them stories. The tall boy, James, wanted to see more. I told them to wait until morning, safer in daylight. But they went anyway, all 6, down into the dark. I followed their lights as far as the second chamber. Then the lights went out. All at once, like they'd been swallowed. Been waiting at the entrance. They haven't come back. Up. No one ever comes back up. The entry ended with a single sentence, written in larger, shakier handwriting. I can hear them sometimes, moving in the walls of the caves. And they are not the children anymore. The investigators now faced a chilling possibility. The cousins had entered the cave system voluntarily, possibly out of curiosity about Hartley's claims, and encountered something that prevented their return. We have to consider multiple scenarios, Hargrove stated carefully. They could have become lost. Cave systems can be disorienting, especially to inexperienced explorers. They could have encountered hazardous conditions, a collapse, flooding, toxic air pockets. Or they could have been harmed by Hartley or someone else who used the caves. The final journal entry raised another disturbing question. If Hartley had been waiting at the cave entrance for the cousins to emerge, where was he now? But had he eventually given up his vigil? Had he entered the caves himself to search for them? Or had he met another fate entirely? In March 2024, the FBI assembled the largest cave exploration operation in the agency's history. Dozens of professional cavers, rescue specialists, and agents began a systematic search of the underground network, starting from the entrance near the cabin. What they found defied easy explanation. The cave system was far more extensive than modern surveys had indicated. Tunnels branched off in countless directions, forming a labyrinth that would have been nearly impossible to navigate without specialized equipment and training. Many passages showed signs of prehistoric human activity, soot from ancient fires, broken pottery fragments, and most notably, extensive pictographs covering certain chamber walls. These markings are consistent with those visible in the Polaroid background, confirmed Dr. Okafor, who joined the exploration team. But what's remarkable is their subject matter. They appear to depict a ritual of some kind involving human figures entering the earth and being transformed. More modern evidence also emerged. Approximately 2 miles into the system, in a large chamber with a ceiling high enough to stand upright, explorers found what appeared to be a campsite. 6 thermal blankets were arranged in a rough circle, and the remains of a fire. Several empty water bottles with 1990s-era labels, and a disposable camera, the film inside ruined by decades of moisture and darkness. This confirms the cousins made it at least this far into the system, Hargrove announced. They apparently stopped to rest or regroup in this chamber before continuing deeper. Beyond this point, the evidence became more fragmented and more difficult to interpret. But a single sneaker, identified as belonging to Aidan Novak, was found wedged in a narrow passage approximately half a mile farther. Emma Patterson's watch was discovered submerged in a small underground pool, its hands stopped at 3:17. The most significant find came nearly 4 miles into the system, in a chamber that showed evidence of a massive collapse. Thousands of tons of rock had fallen from the ceiling at some point, completely blocking what appeared to have been a large passage continuing beyond. The initial geological assessment suggests this collapse occurred approximately 25 to 30 years ago, Dr. Freeman reported. But it's consistent with the seismic activity recorded in this region in January 1997, about a month after the cousins disappeared. The ground-penetrating radar was brought in to examine what lay beyond the collapse, revealing a series of large chambers extending for at least another mile. Whether the cousins had made it past this point before the collapse occurred remained unknown. As for Francis Hartley, his fate became clearer when searchers discovered human remains in a small side passage about 3 miles into the system. Dental records confirmed they belonged to the former DNR employee. He appeared to have died from a combination of dehydration and exposure, perhaps while searching for the missing cousins or fleeing from whatever he believed lurked in the caves. A final expedition in April 2024 pushed deeper into the system through alternative routes, eventually accessing the chambers beyond the collapse from a different approach. What they found there brought the investigation full circle. In the largest chamber yet discovered, with ceilings soaring nearly 60 feet high, explorers found a second camp. Unlike the first, this one showed signs of longer-term occupation. A tent, cooking equipment, supply caches, and most significantly, writing on the walls not ancient pictographs, but modern messages written in what appeared to be charcoal and flashlight smoke. "We can't find the way back," read one message, dated December 17, 1996. "The passages keep changing," read another, dated December 25, Christmas Day. The final message, dated January 7, 1997, simply stated, "If anyone finds this, tell our families we tried to get home." The handwriting matched samples from the missing cousins. "It appears they became lost in the system," Hargrove explained during what would be the final press conference on the case. "Based on the evidence, they survived for at least 26 days underground, moving deeper into the network, perhaps trying to find an alternative exit. The collapse we discovered likely cut off their original entry route. Eventually, they would have run out of supplies. No bodies were found in the final chamber or any of the passages beyond it. Despite thorough searches, the remains of the 6 cousins have never been recovered. The cave system is vast, with many areas still inaccessible or unexplored," Hargrove acknowledged. "There are underground rivers, tight passages that may have been navigable to them but not to our search teams, and countless places where evidence could remain hidden forever." For the families of Vanessa, Aidan, Eliza, Emma, James, and Daniel, the discoveries brought answers but little comfort. "Knowing they were together at the end helped somewhat," Jonathan Novak said during a memorial service held in Lakewood in May 2024. "They faced whatever happened as they faced everything in life as a family." The official FBI conclusions stated that the 6 cousins likely died from exposure, dehydration, or injuries sustained while lost in the cave system following the seismic event that caused the massive collapse. Their remains, according to the report, were likely scattered by underground water movements or animal activity in the decades since. But questions remain that may never be answered. Why did they leave the train station to follow Francis Hartley? What did he show them that was persuasive enough to abandon their travel plans? Why did Vanessa hide their bag with the warning about the platform? And perhaps most puzzling, what did the cousins mean when they wrote that the passages kept changing? Local folklore has, predictably, filled the gaps in the official explanation. Stories now circulate in Lakewood about voices echoing from cave entrances on winter nights. Lights seen moving behind the boarded-up windows of the old train station. About 6 figures sometimes glimpsed walking together along the forest paths, before vanishing when approached. The town has memorialized the cousins with a small park near the station, featuring 6 stone benches arranged in a circle. The Thornhill Novak families have established a scholarship fund for students interested in geology, speleology, and cave safety. "If nothing else comes from this tragedy," Catherine Patterson said at the dedication, "we want to ensure no other families experience what we have endured. No curiosity is worth your life. No underground passage is worth leaving behind everyone who loves you." The train station itself has been renovated and converted into a museum dedicated to local history, with one room specifically focused on the disappearance and subsequent investigation. Visitors can see photographs of the cousins, timeline displays of the case, and replicas of evidence, including the Polaroid that ultimately led to the discovery of their fate. And for Special Agent Russell Hargrove, the case represents both a success and a failure. "We found answers," he reflected during his final visit to Lakewood. "We can tell the families what happened to their children with reasonable certainty. But we couldn't bring them home. And in the end, that feels like falling short. The duffel bag, with its contents including the Polaroid, was returned to the families following the conclusion of the investigation. The writing on the photograph, "We should never have gotten off the platform," remains a haunting reminder of how a simple decision changed the course of 6 lives and the history of an entire town. Vanessa Thornhill would have been 46 this year. Ace Hayden Novak, 45. Twins Eliza and Emma Patterson, 44. James Crawford, 47. Daniel Bennett, 46. They have now been gone longer than they were alive. Yet in Lakewood, they remain forever young 6 cousins caught in a moment of time, stepping off a train platform and into mystery on a snowy December evening in 1996. As winter approaches each year, the people of Lakewood still glance toward the old station as they pass. Some claim to see figures moving behind the windows. Others report hearing laughter on the wind. Most simply remember and wonder about the darkness that lies beneath their feet and what secrets the caves still hold. The FBI file remains technically open, classified as cold but unresolved. Agent Hargrove checks for updates monthly, though he's since been reassigned to other cases. The families have found ways to continue living while carrying their grief. And deep in the forest, the cabin slowly deteriorates, standing as a silent sentinel over the cave entrance below. In the Lakewood Library archives, Francis Hartley's journal is preserved alongside newspaper clippings, police reports, and search maps, the documentation of a mystery that spanned generations. The final pages contain his last coherent entry, written hours before he apparently entered the caves for the final time. They are down there still, moving in the dark. I hear them calling, not in their voices anymore. But I know it's them wanting me to follow. And the Thornhill children, the ones from 72, the family from 54, all of them waiting. I have protected others for so long, warned them away, but I'm tired now, so tired of standing guard. Maybe it's my turn to go below, but to see what they have seen, to understand why no one ever comes back up into the light. Beneath this entry, in handwriting so shaky as to be nearly illegible, is a final line. The passages aren't just changing, and they are waking up. My. Whether these were the ramblings of a mentally ill man or something more remains, like so much about this case, unexplained. The caves beneath Lakewood have been officially sealed by state authorities, their entrances blocked with concrete and steel. Warning signs mark the perimeter of the system. The area around the cabin has been declared off-limits. But still, each winter, fresh footprints appear in the snow leading toward the forest. Each spring, flowers are found arranged near the cave entrances, and occasionally hikers report seeing 6 young people walking together among the trees, laughing and shoving each other playfully before vanishing between one blink and the next. For in Lakewood, Minnesota, some stories never end. Some mysteries are never fully solved. And some people never truly disappear, they simply find another platform from which to depart.